Okay guys, welcome back. This is episode 4 on my tutorial series on how to make a 2D game in Android Studio, and in this episode we're going to be covering collision detection. So to start that off, I actually have a correction to make. So go into your obstacle class, and a while back I had you write this player collide method, and I did it in a really ineffective way. The way we want to do it is say return and then do rect.intersects and then do player.getRectangle, and actually come over here and do rectangle as the first argument. It doesn't really matter, but that's how I'm going to do it. So then copy this. We also need to check if it intersects the other rectangle, so rectangle 2, and then colon, save that. Now that's good. Now come over here into Obstacle Manager, and we need to add a similar method into here. So do public boolean, and it's going to be player. I want to name it the same, so let me make sure. So player collide, and it's going to take in a rect player. And what it's going to do is it's going to say for, and then it's going to loop through all the obstacles. So obstacle ob and obstacles, and we're going to say if ob.playerCollide, pass in the player. So if it ever collides with an obstacle, we want to return true, and if it makes it through this whole loop without ever returning true, we want to return false. And that's it for those two classes. We've created a player collide method that detects if our player is hitting it. So now we can go ahead and close those out. And what we're going to want to do, we need to make a few changes actually. And before I check for the collision, I want to make a change in how we are handling the movement of our player. Because right now we can just tap anywhere on our screen and our player will move there. But in reality, once we set up this collision detection and stuff, we don't want that. We only want you to be able to move the rectangle if you tap it and drag it. We don't want you to just tap anywhere and have it work. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top and we're going to create a boolean. It's going to be a private boolean, and it's going to be, let's say, moving player. And by default, it's going to be set to false. Now come down here to ActionDown, and we're going to say okay. And before I actually get into this, we're going to add one more condition. Since we're having the player now collide with stuff, and we haven't set it up yet, but we're essentially going to have it a game over screen when it does collide. So we want to create a boolean called game over. It's going to be equal to false, but this will just detect if we've collided and we're at the game over screen. I'm going to say if we're not, if we're still playing, then we want to ask whether player.getRectangle.contains, and then we pass in an x and y that are integers. So we do make sure to typecast and do event.getx, comma int, and then event.getY. So we're going to pass in the point that we tapped, and we're going to see if that point lies inside the rectangle that is our player. And if it does, then we're going to say moving player equals true. That way we can actually move our player. So now go ahead and add a break statement here. And now what we're going to want to do is say on move, we want to say if moving player and not game over, then we want to actually move our player. And then we're going to add another thing. You'll see here in a sec. We're going to add another case, and that's going to be motion event dot up. So when we lift our finger up, we of course want to set moving player to false, so that we have to check again whenever we tap. Otherwise, it'd just be, after the first time we tap correctly, it'd be true forever, and it'd always work, and that's not what we want. Okay, now that we're done with that, we want to come down here into our update method. What we want to say is these updating the obstacles, which is going to be moving them down, and updating the player, which is moving the player around, all that we only want to occur if we still are actually playing. You know, we haven't received a game over. So we're going to say if not game over and enclose this whole little chunk of code here. Then we want to do that. And similarly, we want to also check for whether the players collided with the obstacle. So we're going to say if obstacle manager dot player collide, and we're going to pass in player. So if they've collided, then what we want to do is say game over is true. Alright. So now we have a way of detecting when we've collided, and it'll set game over to true, which means it won't call any of this anymore, so it won't update our screen. Essentially, we just have it where it'll freeze. And that's not what we want. We want to show a game over screen. And for me at least, I want that screen to be there for at least 2 seconds before the player can tap away from it. So I'm going to come up here, and right over here on game over, I'm actually going to separate these out to kind of just group my variables. I'm going to add a private long, and that's going to be game over time. And this is going to be the time when we receive this game over. So we're going to say game over time is going to equal system.currentTime millis, which is just the current time, obviously. And now what we want to do is come up here into our action down. So I, like I said, want the player to have to wait 2 seconds. So what I want, and then they can press down and restart their game. So I'm going to say if game over and system dot current time millis minus game over time, so the elapsed time since we received a game over, if that is equal to or exceeds 2 seconds, then I want them to be able to tap and set game over to false. And that's what it's doing right here, of course, because we have action down, game over false, and we want to be able to start a new game. So we want to reset, and we'll create that method in just a sec. It's going to reset our game so that we can play again. I'm going to come up here and create it up here. I'm going to have a public void reset. Alright. So in here we're going to want to reset all the obstacles, move our player to like a safe position, and all that good stuff. And before I actually do that, I want to make a modification up here. When we construct the player, notice how it starts in the top corner. Well, I want it to start at the bottom so it has time to like see where the obstacles are coming and align itself a bit. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say player point, instead of equaling 150, 150, I'm going to have it equal the following. I'm going to say for its x value, I'm going to do constant, and this is going to be the center of the player, keep in mind. So I'm going to have the x value be the constant screen width over 2, so halfway in the middle of the screen, and then I want my player to be 3/4 down the screen. Okay, so now we've set our player point. Obviously it doesn't align with our player because this player right now is in the corner, and we're saying that the center of it's right here. So to account for that, we're just going to say player.update, and we're going to pass in player point. Now we can return to our reset method. What we want to do is again move our player back into that starting position, and we want to say obstacle manager is equal to a new obstacle manager. So we're going to reset the obstacle manager, which is done right like that. And we also want to set moving player to false just to be safe. Now I believe that's all complete, and we have our whole system for the game over and collision detection implemented. Now we actually have to just add the game over screen. So if you come down here into our draw method, we're going to want to keep drawing our player an obstacle even though we have a game over. At least I do. You can change that to just make it a white canvas when you get a game over. But I want it to show that you've actually hit the block when you get a game over. So I'm going to leave that there. And I'm going to say if game over, then we're going to want to draw the game over screen. And for me, at least in this episode, we may make it look nicer in a later episode where we cover UI or different things like that. But for me, in this episode, it's just going to be a text straight in the center of the screen that says game over. And as you'll come to realize, it's actually very hard to get your text centered in the middle of the screen. There's really no good method for it. And especially because screen sizes and aspect ratios and all that are changing. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this method that is on Stack Overflow, posted by this user Andreas, so shout out to him. This stackoverflow.com is a great site if you run into any problems with programming. But anyways, we're going to copy this method right here. You guys can, I'll put the link in the description if you just want to copy it. So you're going to copy that method, draw one, and you're going to come in here and we're going to add that right down in here. And you see we get a few errors, so we got to do a few things. First, we're going to delete this line. We don't need it. And then we need to add an instance variable r, which is supposed to be a rect. So we're going to come up here and we're just going to say, I'm just going to add it at the top because it's not, we're not going to be referencing it really at all. So we're going to just say rect r equals a new rect, and we'll instantiate it in that line right there. Save that. We're not going to touch that again. That's that. And now come back here to draw one and delete this line where we set the paint color, because we want to be able to set that elsewhere. And instead of draw one, I'm just going to rename it to draw center text, because we're drawing text in the center of the screen. So now if game over, we want to draw our text, and you see we need a string, a canvas, and a paint, all of which we have except for the paint. So we're going to make a new paint, and we need to set the text size. So I'm going to say set text size, and I'm going to choose to do 100, and then I'm going to say paint.setColor. We can set it to any color we want. I'm going to look through these real quick. I'll just go with a green, or I'll go with magenta. Obviously you can change it to whatever you want. And then we want to draw the text. So we're going to draw center text, and it's going to be passing canvas, paint, and then our text, which is just going to be game over. So we're going to draw that, and now we should have everything sorted out. We can go ahead and give this a run and see what happens. Okay, it looks like our app has loaded up. Here we are. So we're able to move our player if we click it on the player, and we can move through the obstacles like normal, but if we hit it, we get this game over right in the center of the screen. And if we wait 2 seconds, which has been 2 seconds, and click, then it's going to restart our game. And it still works. If I try spam clicking, it doesn't work till the 2 seconds are up. And now let me tell you about something I found, because I was trying to make this video earlier and I ran into an issue. And that is, when we set up this new mechanism so that you can only move when you tap the player, or when your finger touches the player when you begin dragging, that actually creates this bug with the emulator. I have no idea why, but on the emulator you have to double click it for it to actually work, and then every once in a while you get this error where you can just tap wherever you want. And if I figure out more on this, I'll update you guys, but if you actually download the app onto your phone, it works perfectly fine. So I'm going to leave a link in the description on how you can set up your device, or to set up your device to be connected to Android Studio so that you can export your app to it. But for now, you'll just have to take my word for it. It works fine on the phone. And before I wrap up this video, I'm going to add a few more features in. And the first one's going to be that the tiles, the rate at which they move down the screen increases with time. So we're going to go in here to Obstacle Manager, and what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and create a new variable that's private long init time, so the time at which we initialize this class. And then just come over here and say init time, so we have start time equals init time, and they both equal the current time when we initialize the class. And now we come over here to where we have speed in our update method. Now there's a few things you can do. You see how this is what's it called? 10 seconds, right? And so it takes 10 seconds for an obstacle to move off our screen. Now you can do a few things to alter the speed and have it increase as time goes on. One of which is by just say subtract something off here, and that value changes over time. So like say subtract off 1,000 times like the time or whatever. That would be ridiculous, but it would take off a second each like second that passes. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna multiply this by math.square root of, and then I'm gonna do system dot current time millis, but we already have it stored here as start time, so I'm going to do start time minus init time. I'm going to divide this by 1,000, so I'm going to take the square root of the amount of seconds that's passed, and I'm going to multiply it by what the speed was, and of course I got to typecast this to a float, and then we're good. And so we increase the speed as time goes on. Now, and I'm going to add a second to this. I'm going to say 1 plus that. Okay. So if the time's 0, it multiplies it by 1. So we're going to go ahead and run this. We're going to see if it increases the speed. Alright, so it's loaded up. Let's see if the obstacles increase the speed at which they move down as time goes on. And it may be hard to see, but I can tell you that it does. So it is working, and everything's good. I may, just out of preference, I may want to actually make this slow down, or like the time at which the rate at which it speeds up is a little too quick in my opinion. So I'd divide this maybe by like 2,000, so it kind of goes up every like 2 seconds. But that's just my opinion. You can tinker around with those numbers, but that'll essentially make it speed up as time goes on, which is good. Now the last thing we want to do is we want to implement a score mechanism. So we want to stay here in Obstacle Manager, and right here when we have in our update method, when we remove an object, we want that to count as we want that to add to our score by 1. And that's just how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say every time obstacle reaches the bottom, meaning you dodged it and you're still alive, then you get added to your score. So we're going to go up here and create an int that's called score. It's going to start at 0, and then up here we're going to just say score plus plus. And then in our draw method, we obviously want to draw on the score, so we're going to say, we're going to create a new paint. We're going to say paint is a new paint, and then we're going to say paint.set text size. I'm guessing maybe like, I'll just go with 100 again, and I'll say paint.set color. Again, I'll go with magenta, and then we're going to say canvas.draw text. I may do draw text. Okay, so it takes in a string and a paint. Or let me look through the methods. Okay, so no, we're gonna give it a text, an X and a Y, and a paint. So our text can be, it's gonna be empty string plus the score, and our start, or our X, I'll just do as 50. We'll go down 50 in the Y direction too, and we're going to pass in paint. Save that, and it's going to draw our score. Oh, whoops, it pulled up. So, okay, we have a score, but you can see it's a little off the screen. Let's just make sure it works. Okay, our score is going up, as you can see, and it's displayed in the corner. Alright, so to fix the text being off screen, we actually are going to want to just add paint.descent and then subtract paint.ascent. And that'll just get the distance from the baseline to the top of the text. And by adding that, we will get rid of that cropping. Alright, so the app is loading up, and you can see that the score is now fully on our screen. And it works as expected. I died pretty soon. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. And so stay tuned for the next video, and thanks for watching.